Close your eyes. Breathe in and out. Let your shoulders soften. Let your thoughts drift like leaves on a quiet river. You don't need to do anything tonight. Not solve anything, not fix anything. Just be here. With me, with this story, with the gentle dark that holds you so well. This is a story about stillness, about light that doesn't shout, but whispers, about stars who once raced across the sky until they saw something on earth that made them stop. It's a story about a woman who folds dreams into paper lanterns, about a star who dared to come down and learn how to care, about a town that forgot how to dream and remembered one breath at a time. And yes, it's also a story about you, because somewhere in these words, your heart will recognize itself. So let go of the day. Let go of what's behind you and what's ahead. Right now, there's only this moment, soft, safe, and full of quiet grace. The stars are watching. The night is kind, and you are exactly where you need to be. Now, let the story begin. Chapter 1. The Night That Stood Still. It was an ordinary evening. The sun dipped behind the hills as if tucking itself into a blanket woven from rose-colored mist. Sparrows returned to their nests. Cats began their quiet patrols through moonlit alleys. And people turned off their lights, washed their faces, kissed those they loved, and had no idea that this night would be unlike any other. Because on this night, the stars forgot to move. There was no thunder, no crackle of cosmic warning, no sign at all that anything had changed. Only stillness. The deeper kind of quiet, not the absence of sound, but the presence of peace. High above, Orion paused mid-stride. His sword, always raised in readiness, now hung gently at his side, as though he'd decided, just for tonight, that there was nothing left to fight. The great bear stopped circling the north and lay down on his back, gazing upward into the endless dark. Even the moon's silver steed, who usually galloped through the clouds with hooves of light, had come to a halt and begun grazing on stardust like sweet grass. And down below, people didn't notice right away, but their hearts did. In a cottage by the sea, a fisherman named Thomas sat on his porch, holding a cup of tea that had long gone cold. He couldn't say why, but he couldn't look away from the sky. There was nothing unusual to see, just the familiar scatter of stars. But something inside him whispered, "Stay, watch, this matters." So he stayed. He breathed, and he simply was. In a city where lights never sleep, a boy named Milos climbed out of bed without reason. He hadn't heard a sound. He just felt it, like a call without words. He pressed his palms against the cool window pane and looked up. The stars looked back, and they didn't blink. Far inland, in a mountain village wrapped in pine and silence, an old woman named Anna set down her knitting. Her needle hovered between 5 unfinished loops, and she turned toward the kitchen window. "Strange," she murmured, Tonight, the darkness breathed slower. And indeed, it did. The wind softened. The leaves ceased their rustling. Even the owls fell quiet. The world held its breath. And then, on a quiet street where sunlight lingered longer than anywhere else, a small shop door opened. It wasn't grand. It wasn't famous. It bore no sign except a small wooden plaque, hand-painted with simple letters, "Lanterns for Dreamers." From it stepped a woman with hair the color of dawn and eyes that knew exactly how long one breath could last. Her name was Elira, and she looked up at the sky. But she wasn't surprised. "Ah," she said, her voice so soft only the breeze could carry it. They remembered today. Remembered what? That wasn't time to say yet. But as she stood there, arms folded gently over her heart, her smile was a promise. All is as it should be. Peace has come to visit. She stepped back inside. On her work table waited a new lantern, unfinished in form, but already whole in spirit. Paper made from dried moonflower petals, glue mixed with morning dew and kindness, and a thread of light gathered from the dreams of children who once dreamed of flying. Elira picked up her brush and began to write, not with words meant for eyes, but with wishes meant for hearts. And as she wrote outside, the stars remained still. Not from error, not from weariness, but because just this once, they wanted to see what happened when she weren't watching. And what they saw, oh, was worth every second of waiting. Chapter 2. Elira's Workshop of Dreams. If you were to walk down the cobbled lane where the streetlights glow like drowsy fireflies, you'd find it almost by accident. No sign calls attention, no bell chimes when you arrive. Just a small wooden door, slightly warped from years of rain and sun, and a faint scent, like old paper, warm honey, and something you can't quite name, but your heart recognizes. This is where Elira lives, and this is where dreams learn how to fly. Inside, the air moves slowly, as if time itself has taken off its shoes. Shelves line the walls, not with books, but with jars, hundreds of them. Some hold dust that glimmers like crushed stars. Others cradle dried petals from flowers that bloom only during eclipses. One jar, tucked in the far corner, contains nothing but silence. But if you hold it close to your ear, you'll hear the sound of a child laughing in a memory. At the center of the room stands a long table made from a single piece of driftwood, smoothed by oceans and patience. On it rest brushes with bristles spun from moth wings, inkwells filled with liquid moonlight, and sheets of paper so thin they tremble when a wish passes nearby. Elira doesn't make lanterns. She listens for them. Every evening, just after sunset, she sits at her table, closes her eyes, and waits. Not for customers, not for orders, but for the quiet hum of a soul that needs light. Sometimes it comes from far away. A mother in a city of steel, whispering a lullaby into empty air. Sometimes it's close, a neighbor boy who hasn't smiled since his dog passed. And sometimes it's so faint it's almost gone. The flicker of someone who's forgotten how to hope. When she hears it, Elira opens her eyes and begins. First, she chooses the paper, not by sight, but by feeling. She runs her fingers over each sheet until one sighs beneath her touch. This paper was made for moonflowers, harvested on nights when the sky was clear and kind. It remembers gentleness. It knows how to hold sorrow without breaking. Next, the ink. She dips her brush into a small bowl of silver liquid. Not paint, but starlight collected in a teacup during the last full moon, mixed with a drop of rainwater and a single grain of salt from tears that were finally released. It becomes more than color. It becomes promise. Then, the folding. She never uses a template. Each lantern is shaped by the need it carries. A round one for comfort, a tall one for courage, a lantern with soft edges for those who've been hurt too many times. As she folds, she whispers, not spells, not chants, just words that have weight because they're true. You are not alone. Rest is not wasted time. Your heart still knows the way. And when the lantern is nearly finished, she does the most important part. She breathes into it. Not just air, but a breath filled with all the quiet love she's gathered over the years. The kind that doesn't ask for anything in return. The kind that says, I see you, and you matter. Only then does she light the wick. A tiny flame, no bigger than a heartbeat. The moment it catches, the lantern glows with a light that doesn't burn. It doesn't shine outward to blind. It shines inward to heal. And if you were to watch closely, you'd see the paper pulse just once, like a sleeping creature waking to kindness. But Elira doesn't keep them. Oh no, these lanterns are not meant to stay. She carries each one to the back garden, a hidden courtyard where ivy climbs stone walls and a single apple tree bears fruit even in winter. There, she lifts the lantern toward the sky and lets go. It rises slowly, gently, as if the night itself is cradling it. And somewhere, far away, someone feels their chest grow lighter. Someone sighs in their sleep. Someone smiles without knowing why, because the lantern has found them, not through distance, but through resonance. And tonight, Elira is making a special one. Not for one person, but for everyone who has forgotten how to dream. She folds the paper with extra care, whispers a wish older than language, and breathes into it a hope so vast it could hold the whole world. Outside, the stars are still motionless, watching, waiting, wondering what this little light will do. They don't know yet. But soon, they will. Chapter 3. The first lantern that reached the sky. It began as all great journeys do, with a single breath. The lantern Elira had made that night was unlike any before. Its paper shimmered with the faintest silver, as if woven from spider silk and starlight. its edges curled like petals opening at dawn. And inside, the flame didn't flicker. It pulsed, slow and steady, like the heartbeat of someone finally at peace. She carried it through the garden, barefoot on cool stone, past the apple tree that bore fruit in winter, past the fountain that sang only when no one was listening. At the edge of her yard, where the earth met the sky in a soft blur of shadow and possibility, she stopped. She didn't say a word. She simply opened her hands, and the lantern rose, not quickly, not eagerly, but with the quiet confidence of something that knows it belongs among the stars. It drifted upward, passing through low-hanging branches that parted gently as if bowing. It floated above rooftops where cats slept in the warm patches of moonlight. It crossed over rivers that mirrored its glow like liquid glass. And still it climbed. Higher now, past the last birds returning to their nests, past the clouds that curled like sleeping whales, past the thin veil where the air grows cold and dreams grow bold. Down below, the world slept on, but above, the stars noticed. At first, they were curious. What is this small trembling light? It has no orbit, no name, no place in the charts. Then they grew still, because this light did not burn to be seen. It burned to remember. As the lantern passed near Lyra, the constellation of song, one of her strings hummed, a note so soft it hadn't been heard since the first lullaby was ever sung. Near Cassiopeia, who sat eternally in her throne of pride, the lantern's glow brushed her cheek, and for the first time in centuries, she smiled. But it was Luma who moved. Luma was the youngest of the stars, not the brightest, not the oldest, but the most curious. She had always wondered what it was like down there, where hearts beat faster and tears fell warm. While the others kept their paths, Luma leaned forward just a little and reached out. Her light touched the lantern, and in that moment, something passed between them. Not words, not images, but feeling. The weight of loneliness. The warmth of a hand held in the dark. The quiet joy of waking up and seeing sunlight on the wall. Luma gasped, not with sound, but with wonder. She watched as the lantern continued its journey, not toward any star in particular, but toward the space between them, the quiet gaps where silence lives and hope hides. And then, it did something no lantern had ever done before. It sang, not with voice, but with vibration, a hum so pure it made the dust between galaxies tremble. It was the sound of a mother humming to her child, of wind through wheat fields at dusk, of a heart finally saying yes to rest. The stars listened. Orion lowered his sword completely. The great bear rolled onto his side, paws tucked beneath him like a pup. Even the North Star, steadfast and solemn, blinked twice, slowly, tenderly, as if wiping away a tear. And Luma? Luma made a decision. She would go down, not forever, not recklessly, but just long enough to see, to touch, to feel, to understand what kind of beings could make such light from such softness. She gathered her radiance, folded it like a cloak, and stepped off the edge of the sky. As she fell, she didn't plummet. She drifted like a dandelion seed on a summer breeze. Her light dimmed, not from fear, but from care. She didn't want to blind anyone. She only wanted to belong for a little while. By the time she reached the earth, she looked like a girl, no older than 12, with hair like spun moonlight and eyes that held entire galaxies, though no one would notice unless they looked very closely. She landed softly in Elira's garden, right where the lantern had begun its journey. The apple tree rustled in greeting, the fountain sighed with joy, and Elira, standing by her window with a cup of chamomile tea, simply smiled. "You've come," she said, not surprised. "I've been waiting." Luma stepped forward, barefoot on the same stones, and looked up at the woman whose hands had shaped the light that changed the sky. "Why?" she asked, her voice like wind chimes dipped in honey. "Why send something so fragile into the vast dark?" Elira set down her cup. "Because sometimes," she said, "the darkest places aren't out there. They're in here." She placed a hand over her heart. And light doesn't need to be strong to heal. It only needs to be kind. Luma was quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, "Can I learn how to make one?" Elira's eyes softened. "Yes," she said, "but first, you must learn how to listen." And so, under a sky full of motionless stars, the star and the dream maker sat together on the garden bench, side by side, as the night held them both in its gentle arms. Somewhere, far away, a child turned in their sleep and smiled. A sailor on a quiet sea felt his chest grow lighter. An old man dreaming of his wife woke just enough to whisper, "I'm still here," all because one lantern dared to rise and one star dared to follow. Chapter 4. Luma comes to Earth. The morning came not with a shout, but with a sigh. Pale gold light spilled over the hills like warm milk, touching the rooftops, the riverbanks, the sleeping faces of those who had dreamed without fear for the first time in years. Dew gathered on spider webs, turning them into necklaces of tiny diamonds. And in Elira's garden, two figures sat side by side on the old wooden bench, neither speaking, neither needing to. Luma, now in the shape of a girl with bare feet and starlight tangled in her hair, watched as mist rose from the earth like ghosts returning home. She had never seen morning before. In the sky, there was only endless night, or the slow, silent turn of celestial seasons. But here, time had texture. It had scent, it had warmth. "It smells like forgiveness," she said softly, eyes closed, breathing in the air. Elira smiled. "That's the honeysuckle. It only blooms after rain." Luma opened her eyes. "And the rain, does it cry?" "Sometimes," Elira said, "but mostly it just remembers how to fall." They sat in silence again, listening to the world wake up, not with noise, but with presence. A robin called once. A breeze stirred the leaves. Somewhere, a kettle began to hum. After a while, Elira stood. "Come," she said. If you want to learn how to make lanterns, you must first learn how to be still. She led Luma into the workshop. Inside, the morning light filtered through the windows in soft columns, catching dust motes that danced like tiny spirits. The jars on the shelves glowed faintly, some blue, some amber, some the color of a sigh. The driftwood table waited, clean and patient. "Sit," Elira said, pulling out a chair carved from olive wood. "And don't do anything." Luma blinked. "Don't do anything? Just sit. Feel your breath. Let your thoughts pass like clouds. Don't hold them. Don't chase them. Just let them be." Luma tried. At first, her mind raced. What if I fail? What if I break the paper? What if my light isn't enough? But then she remembered the lantern, how it didn't try to be bright. It just was. So she softened and breathed. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Outside, the sun climbed higher. Bees visited the lavender. A cat curled up on the windowsill and fell asleep. And inside, something shifted. Luma's shoulders dropped. Her hands, once clenched in quiet anxiety, opened like flowers. And in that stillness, she heard it. The faintest hum, coming not from the room, but from within herself. It was the sound of her own heart remembering how to listen. Elira watched, saying nothing. When the moment was right, she placed a single sheet of paper on the table in front of Luma. "This is moonflower paper," she said. "It was made during a night when someone forgave themselves. It carries that kindness in its fibers." Luma reached out, but stopped just before touching it. "Will it know I'm not from here?" Elira's eyes softened. "Paper doesn't care where you're from. It only cares if you're honest." Luma took a breath. Then she touched the paper. It didn't burn. It didn't flinch. It simply warmed beneath her fingertips, as if recognizing a long-lost friend. "Now," Elira said, "don't think about making a lantern. Think about someone who needs light." Luma closed her eyes. She thought of the sailor she'd glimpsed from the sky, alone on his boat, staring at the waves as if they held answers. She thought of the child who cried in their dreams but woke too afraid to speak. She thought of the old woman who talked to her husband's photograph every evening just to hear a voice, even if it was her own. Her chest ached, not with pain, but with love. The tears gathered at the corners of her eyes, but she didn't wipe them away. Instead, one fell, just one, and landed on the paper. Where it touched, the page shimmered. "That's it," Elira whispered. "Let your heart speak. Your hands will follow." Slowly, carefully, Luma began to fold. Her fingers were clumsy at first. She creased the paper too sharply, then smoothed it gently, as if apologizing. But with each fold, she grew quieter, more present, more here. She didn't make a perfect lantern. One side was slightly larger than the other. The top tilted like a sleepy head. But it glowed, not with the fierce brilliance of a star, but with the tender pulse of a human heart learning to hope. When she finished, she looked up at Elira, eyes wide. "Is it enough?" Elira placed a hand on her shoulder. It's more than enough. It's true. That evening, they walked to the edge of the garden together. Luma held her lantern with both hands, as if cradling a bird. She looked up at the sky, her former home, and hesitated. "What if they forget me?" she asked quietly. "The stars don't forget," Elira said. "They just wait, and when you're ready, they'll welcome you back, with stories of your own to tell." Luma nodded. Then she released the lantern. It rose slowly, wobbling at first, then steadying, as if finding its purpose. It climbed past the apple tree, past the rooftops, past the clouds that parted like curtains. And high above, the stars leaned closer. They saw the imperfection. They saw the tear. They saw the love folded into every crease. And for the first time, they understood. Earth's light wasn't weaker than theirs. It was braver, because it shone despite the dark. Luma watched until the lantern became a single point among thousands, indistinguishable, yet utterly unique. Then she turned to Elira. "Can I stay a little longer?" she asked. Elira smiled. "As long as you need." And so, under a sky that had learned to pause, a star and a dream maker returned to the workshop, not to make more lanterns, but to sit in the quiet, side by side, as the world breathed around them. Somewhere, the sailor felt a sudden calm on the sea. The child slept through the night without nightmares. The old woman heard her husband's voice in the wind. And this time it said, "I'm proud of you." All because one star dared to come down, and one heart dared to teach her how to care. Chapter 5. The Town That Forgot How to Dream. There was a town, just one, where dreams had stopped coming. Not because the people were cruel, not because they were broken, but because they had simply forgotten how to wait for them. It sat in a valley ringed by gray hills, where the river ran straight and silent, as if afraid to make waves. The houses were neat, the streets clean, the clocks always on time. People woke at 6, worked until 6, ate dinner at 6:30, and went to bed at 9. Never earlier, never later. They spoke in measured tones, avoided eye contact on the street, and kept their curtains drawn just enough to let in light, but not wonder. Children still played, but only in designated parks, and only with toys that came with instructions. Artists painted, but only what sold. Lovers held hands, but never under the stars, too impractical, too cold. And at night they slept, but not deeply, not freely. Their dreams had grown thin, like old paper, until one day they stopped arriving altogether. No one noticed right away. After all, who misses something they haven't felt in years? But their bodies remembered. Their shoulders grew heavy. Their eyes lost their sparkle. Their laughter became polite, not joyful. They moved through life like ghosts wearing skin, present but not alive. Then, one evening, something changed. It began as a whisper in the wind, a scent of honeysuckle where none grew. Then a flicker in the sky, So faint, most dismissed it as a trick of the light. But it wasn't. It was Luma's lantern, the one she'd made with trembling hands and a heart full of questions. The one that carried the tear of a star learning to care. It drifted over the valley like a feather carried by grace, and when it reached the town square, where the clock tower stood tall and unfeeling, it did not pass by. It landed. Gently, silently, it settled on the stone bench beneath the old oak tree. The same bench where lovers once carved their names, now worn smooth by time and indifference. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the lantern glowed brighter, not with fire, but with memory, and the town began to remember. First, it was the baker. He was closing his shop, wiping flour from his hands, when he caught the light out of the corner of his eye. He turned and froze, because in that glow, he saw himself as a boy, standing on a stool, helping his grandmother knead dough while she hummed an old folk song. He hadn't thought of her in 20 years. Now, tears filled his eyes, not from sadness, but from the sudden return of something precious. He didn't go home that night. He sat on the bench, watching the lantern, and for the first time in decades, he dreamed while awake. Next came the school teacher, Mrs. Hale. She'd been walking home, grading papers under the street lamp, when she saw the light. She almost walked past, but something pulled her back. As she neared, the lantern pulsed. And in that pulse, she heard the voice of her students, not reciting facts, but laughing during a rainstorm, chasing frogs, drawing pictures of dragons with 7 wings. She dropped her papers and smiled. By midnight, a small crowd had gathered, not talking, not pointing, just being near the light. A teenager who hadn't spoken to her parents in months sat cross-legged on the grass, hugging her knees, feeling something loosen in her chest. An old man who'd stopped playing piano after his wife died stood at the edge of the square, fingers twitching as if remembering keys. Even the mayor, stiff-collared and schedule-bound, paused on his way home, removed his hat, and stood quietly for 10 full minutes. No one knew what to say, so no one said anything. And in that silence, something rare bloomed. Permission. Permission to feel tired. Permission to hope. Permission to want more than just fine. Back in Elira's workshop, miles away, Luma stirred in her sleep. She'd been dreaming of constellations when she felt it, a soft tug in her chest, like a thread connecting her to something far off. She sat up. "Elira," she whispered. "Something's happening." Elira was already at the window, gazing toward the valley. "Yes," she said softly. "The lantern found its home." "But what will they do?" Luma asked. "They'll begin," Elira said, slowly, quietly, "but they'll begin." And they did. The next morning, the baker didn't open at 6. He opened at 7 and put a sign in the window. "Today's special, Grandma's honey loaf, made with love, not timer." The school teacher canceled her lesson plan. Instead, she took her students outside and asked, "What makes your heart feel light?" The old man dusted off his piano and played one note, then another, then a whole song, off-key, imperfect, beautiful. The teenager texted her mom, "Can we talk?" And that night, for the first time in years, the people of the town didn't just sleep, they dreamed. Not grand adventures or prophecies, just small, tender things. A child flying on a paper airplane, a couple dancing in the kitchen, a garden growing in the middle of the square, and high above, the stars watched, still motionless, but now with understanding. Because they saw what Luma had learned. Dreams don't need to be loud to change the world. They only need to be real. In the days that followed, more lanterns would come, sent by Elira, guided by Luma's quiet courage. Each one would land in a different place. A hospital window, a prison yard, a lonely apartment above a laundromat. And each time, someone would stop. Breathe, remember. But it all began here, in a town that had forgotten how to dream, until a single lantern reminded them that they were still worthy of light. Chapter 6. A Day Without Time. The next morning, something strange happened in the town that had forgotten how to dream. The clocks didn't stop all at once. It wasn't dramatic. No gears ground to a halt. No bells fell silent mid-chime. Instead, time simply softened. At first, no one noticed. The baker opened his shop at 7, as he decided the night before. But when he looked at the clock above the oven, the hands were still pointing to 6:40. He frowned, tapped the glass, but they didn't move. He shrugged, tied on his apron, and began kneading dough anyway. The rhythm of his hands felt more honest than any number. At the school, Mrs. Hale's classroom clock froze at 8:12, just as a sparrow landed on the windowsill. She didn't scold the students for staring. Instead, she said, "Let's watch it for a while." And they did. For 10 minutes, 20? Who could say? The sun moved across the floor, but no one counted. In the town square, the great clock tower, once the pride of the mayor's efficiency campaign, stopped at 9 exactly. Its hands hung in perfect balance, as if finally agreeing that now was enough. And still, life went on, but differently. Without the pressure of minutes, people began to linger. A man buying bread asked the baker how his night was, and meant it. 2 old women on a bench shared a thermos of tea and talked about their childhoods, not their ailments. A boy lay on his back in the grass, watching clouds shape themselves into dragons, ships, and sleeping bears. And no one told him to get up. Time hadn't vanished. It had just stopped shouting. And in the quiet, something remarkable happened. People began to feel whole again. The barista at the corner cafe served coffee slower, letting the steam curl like incense. She noticed the tired eyes of the nurse who came every morning, and today she added an extra biscuit for courage. The nurse smiled, really smiled, and stayed 5 minutes longer than usual, just watching sunlight dance on the table. At the library, the librarian, who had always reshelved books by strict category, left a stack of poetry on the children's table. A little girl picked one up, opened it, and read aloud, The sky is not far. It lives in your breath. No one corrected her pronunciation. Everyone listened. Even the river seemed to slow its pace, as if enjoying the company of the willow trees that dipped their branches into its surface like fingers testing bathwater. Back in Elira's workshop, Luma stood by the window, watching the distant valley through a spyglass made of polished moonstone. "They're not rushing," she whispered, awe in her voice. "No," Elira said, stirring a pot of chamomile on the stove. "They've remembered that being isn't something you do between tasks. It's the task itself." Luma turned. "But won't everything fall apart? Without schedules? Without plans?" Elira smiled. "Plans are maps, Samet, but sometimes you need to walk without one, to feel the earth beneath your feet, not just the destination ahead." She poured 2 cups of tea. "Today isn't lost. It's found." And indeed, the day unfolded like a flower opening at its own pace. At noon, or what would have been noon, the townspeople gathered in the square, not because someone called a meeting, but because their hearts led them there. No agenda, no speeches, just presence. Someone brought a guitar, not to perform, but to share. Someone else laid out a blanket with bread, cheese, and wild strawberries. Children ran barefoot, laughing at nothing and everything. Elders sat in the shade, holding hands without explanation. And above them, the sky held its breath. The stars, still motionless, watched with something like reverence, because they saw what rarely happens on Earth. A day lived not for tomorrow, but for now. No one checked their phone. No one worried about what came next. No one felt behind. For the first time in generations, the town existed outside of time, not in chaos, but in harmony. As evening fell, soft and golden, the baker lit a candle and placed it on the same bench where the lantern had landed. Others followed. Soon the square glowed with dozens of small flames, each one a quiet rebellion against hurry, a tiny monument to stillness. Luma, watching from afar, felt a warmth in her chest that had no name. "It's beautiful," she said. "Yes," Elira replied. "This is what the stars forgot to see. Not the wars, not the noise, but this. The ordinary miracle of people choosing kindness over speed." That night, when the townspeople finally went to bed, they didn't set alarms. They simply whispered, "I'll wake when I'm ready." And somewhere, deep in their dreams, the lanterns they'd received glowed softly, reminding them that they were safe, they were loved, and they didn't have to earn rest. High above, Luma's fellow stars began to stir. One by one, they blinked, not in impatience, but in wonder. Because they understood now, Earth wasn't broken. It was just waiting to be seen. And in that seeing, healing had begun. Chapter 7. The stars begin to move again. It began with a single breath from the sky. Not a gust, not a storm, just a soft exhale, like the universe remembering how to sigh. High above the sleeping world, the stars stirred. For days they had stood still, watching Earth with wide, silent eyes. They had seen lanterns rise like prayers. They had seen hearts soften in town squares. They had seen a star-shaped girl learn to fold paper with trembling hands. And in all that stillness, something inside them had changed. They no longer feared missing anything, because they realized they were part of it all along. The first to move was Lyra. She had always been the singer among them, the one who held the oldest melodies in her strings. Now, she plucked a single note, so gentle it didn't break the silence, but wove through it like thread through fabric. The sound drifted down, not as music, but as feeling, a lullaby for the dreamers below. Then Cassiopeia shifted in her throne, not with pride, but with grace. She leaned forward just slightly and let a single beam of light fall toward the valley, not to illuminate, but to bless. Orion lowered his sword completely and placed it at his feet. He crossed his arms over his chest and bowed his head, not in defeat, but in reverence. And the great bear, he rolled onto his paws, stretched like a contented cat, and began to walk again. But slower now, more gently, as if carrying something precious in his paws. One by one, the stars returned to their paths. But they did not return unchanged. Their movements were softer, their light warmer. Where once they raced across the sky in ancient patterns, now they paused just for a heartbeat to glance down at the world below. And the sky itself began to breathe, not in great heaves, but in slow, steady waves, like a sleeper turning in peaceful slumber. The constellations no longer felt like distant rulers, but like old friends who had learned to listen. Back on Earth, Luma felt it first. She was sitting on the garden bench, wrapped in a woolen shawl Elira had knitted from dreams and sheep's wool. When she looked up and saw it, a star blinked, then another, then a whole trail of them, shimmering like footsteps returning home. "They're moving," she whispered. Elira joined her, holding 2 mugs of warm milk with a pinch of cinnamon. "They've remembered," she said. "Motion isn't duty, it's dance." Luma smiled. "Will they forget again?" "Maybe," Elira said softly. "But now they know what to look for, and that makes all the difference." That night, as the stars resumed their journey, something new happened. They didn't just move. They shone differently. Their light carried echoes of what they'd witnessed. The baker's honey loaf, the child's cloud dragon, the old man's off-key piano song. And whenever someone on Earth looked up and felt alone, the star would pause, just for a second, and glow a little brighter, as if to say, "I see you, I remember you." In the town that had forgotten how to dream, people noticed the change too. An elderly woman watering her geraniums stopped and looked up. "The sky feels kinder," she said to no one in particular. A young father rocking his baby to sleep whispered, "Look, little one, the stars are dancing for you." Even the river seemed to ripple with reflected starlight, as if singing back to the heavens. And high above, Luma's celestial family watched her, not with longing, but with love. They knew she would return one day. But not yet, because Earth still needed her light. And she still needed Earth's warmth. So the stars moved on, but not away. They moved with the world now, not above it. Their orbits grew more fluid, less rigid. Sometimes they'd drift closer to the moon just to hear her hum. Other times, they'd gather near the Milky Way to share stories of the lanterns they'd seen. And every night, without fail, one small star, brighter than the others, though no astronomer could explain why, would hover just above Elira's garden, pulsing gently, like a heartbeat made of light. Luma would wave. The star would shimmer in reply. No words were needed, because now both sky and earth understood. Stillness and motion are not opposites. They are two ways of loving the same world. And as the night deepened, Elira and Luma sat together in comfortable silence, watching the heavens turn, not with urgency, but with joy. Somewhere, a child dreamed of flying on a star. Somewhere, a sailor steered his ship by a light that felt like home. Somewhere, an old woman fell asleep smiling, certain she was not forgotten. All because the stars had learned to move again, not faster, but with heart. Chapter 8. Lanterns that never go out. After the stars began to move again, something quiet and lasting took root in the world. It wasn't loud, it didn't make headlines, but it changed everything. People began to come, not in crowds, not all at once, but one by one, drawn by a feeling they couldn't name. They arrived at the edge of Elira's village with tired eyes and full hearts, carrying questions they hadn't spoken aloud in years. Can I learn to rest? Is it too late to hope? Will I ever feel light again? And Elira always answered the same way. Come in, sit, breathe. The lanterns are waiting. She didn't open a school. She didn't write a book. She simply opened her door. And so, slowly, gently, the House of Quiet Hours was born. It wasn't a grand building, just Elira's workshop, expanded with rooms made of reclaimed wood, old windows, and walls painted the color of dawn. There was a kitchen where soup simmered all day, made from vegetables, kindness, and a pinch of starlight. There was a library filled not with rules, but with stories that whispered, "You're not alone." And there was a courtyard where the apple tree still bore fruit in winter, its branches now strung with tiny lanterns that glowed long after their flames had gone out. Because here, lanterns didn't burn, they remembered. Elira taught visitors how to make them, not as craft, but as ritual. First, they would sit in silence for as long as needed, sometimes minutes, sometimes hours, until their shoulders dropped and their breath deepened. Then they would choose paper, not with their eyes, but with their hands. Let your fingers find the one that sighs, Elira would say. Next, they would mix ink, not with measurements, but with intention. A drop of rainwater for release, a pinch of dried lavender for peace, a single grain of salt from tears that had finally been honored. And when they folded, they didn't follow lines. They followed feeling, Some made lanterns shaped like hearts, others like birds, boats, or open hands. One man made a lantern that looked like a key. "I've been locked out of my own life," he said quietly. Elira nodded. "Then this will help you find the door." When the lantern was finished, they would light it, not with a match, but with a breath. And as the flame caught, they would whisper a wish, not for more, but for enough. Then they would carry it to the courtyard and let it rise. But something strange happened. These lanterns didn't vanish into the sky. They stayed, not physically, no. They still floated upward, dissolving into the night like mist, but their light remained in the hearts of those who made them, in the air of the house, in the very stones of the courtyard. Visitors would leave the next morning, lighter, softer, quieter. But they would carry a small folded paper in their pocket, a blank sheet ready for the next time they needed light. And back home, when darkness came, as it always does, they would unfold it, place it on their windowsill, and remember, I am still worthy of peace. Over time, others began to build their own houses of quiet hours, in cities, in villages, even in apartment balconies with potted herbs and string lights. They didn't copy Elira's methods exactly. Some used origami, others painted glass jars. One woman in Oslo made lanterns from ice that melted into the sea, carrying wishes with the tide. But all of them shared one truth. Light isn't meant to be kept. It's meant to be passed on. But Luma helped wherever she could. She never claimed to be a teacher. She simply sat with people as they folded, her presence a quiet reminder that even stars can feel lost and still find their way. One evening, a young girl named Mira came to the house. She had lost her brother the year before and hadn't spoken his name since. She sat in the corner, arms wrapped around herself, eyes downcast. Luma didn't say anything. She just sat beside her, took a sheet of paper, and began to fold. Slowly, Mira watched. Then, hesitantly,
Epilogue. If you look up tonight, really look, you might notice something gentle. The stars are moving again. But not as they once did. They don't race across the sky like messengers with urgent news. They drift. They pause. They linger. As if they've learned that some things are worth watching, and maybe they're watching you, not to judge, not to measure, but simply to witness, to hold space for your breath, your silence, your quiet courage. You don't need to be perfect to be seen. You don't need to have all the answers. You only need to be here, right now, in this moment, soft and real and human. Somewhere, a lantern you've never seen is glowing with your name in its light. Not because you earned it, but because you exist. And that is enough. Elira still tends her workshop. Luma still walks between earth and sky. And the house of quiet hours? It's everywhere now, in a mother's lullaby, in a friend's listening ear, in the way you let yourself rest when the world says hurry. You don't need to find it. You already live inside it. So if your heart feels heavy tonight, breathe, just breathe. And know this, even when you forget your own light, the stars remember for you, they always have. They always will. Now close your eyes. Let your shoulders soften. Let your thoughts drift like lanterns on a summer breeze. You are safe. You are held. You are part of something vast and kind. And somewhere high above, a star pauses, just for you, and whispers, "Sleep now, I've got you."